Everybody. Welcome to our third workshop on the Marina General Plan. My name is
a nuestro taller.
세 번째로 드릴 워크숍에 참여해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Elena and Michelle, hold on one second, please. My name is Matt Ramey. I'm with Ramey and Associates, and we have already tipped our hand that we have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish and in Korean. So let's go to the next slide. And first, I'm going to have Elena in Spanish, and then Michelle, you can take over in Korean. So Elena.
La interpretación en Zoom es simultánea para esta reunión y se hará en español. Por favor, haga clic en el icono de interpretación en su barra de herramientas para acceder al idioma deseado.
네, 오늘 세 번째 워크숍에 오신 것을 대단히 환영합니다. 본 회의는 한국어 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 원하는 언어에 사용하시려면 이제 도구 모음에서 해석 아이콘을 클릭하시면 됩니다.
Hey, great. So Juan, go ahead and launch, or Melissa, go ahead and launch the interpretation rooms. So everyone should see at the bottom a little globe that says interpretation, and go ahead and click on that, and then you can pick the language channel you want to listen in English, Spanish, or Korean. So again, my name is, you can go to the next slide. My name is Matt Ramey, and I'm with Ramey and Associates, and we're the lead consultant on the general plan. We are here tonight to talk about health and environmental justice in the city of Marina. Our agenda this evening is a brief introduction and welcome. We will then give an overview presentation with allowing some time for question and answer. And then we will move into a small group activity to discuss health and environmental justice conditions to get everybody's perspective and to answer any additional questions. And then we'll have a closing and next steps at about 7:45 and end promptly at 8 o'clock this evening. Before I go any further, I'd like to actually introduce a few people here this evening. From city staff, we have Guido Cristone and Allison Hunter, who are our two fabulous community development department staff members, and they are leading this effort from the city and doing a tremendous job. And then from my team at Ramey and Associates, we have a few people. Juan Reynoso, who you'll be hearing from this evening, who is our environmental justice expert. Then we have Melissa Stark, who is one of our superstar planners, as well as Sarah Perez, who is one of our newer superstar planners. So we're glad that everyone is here. Welcome. This is such an incredibly important topic to think about health and environmental justice in a community. And we're really excited to be here this evening talking about it. We have been doing a lot of research on the topic, and you're going to hear the results tonight. But really what we're trying to do tonight is to present what we know, but then more importantly, hear back from all of you about what you know about the city to make sure that we have all of the knowledge that you have as we begin to address this really important topic this evening. Next slide, please. So our objectives for the meeting this evening are first to provide context and background on environmental justice. The second is to identify primary health and environmental justice issues and challenges facing the city of Marina. Third is to discuss existing conditions for these topics. And then the last topic is to begin to discuss the long-term health and environmental justice strategies for the city that we can begin to think about in this general plan update process. Next slide. Just want to take a minute and give you all a brief update on general plan and what it is and what we're doing here this evening and how this fits in with the rest of the project we're working on. Next. So the first question is, what is a general plan? The general plan, as I will talk about in a minute, is a long-term policy and vision document for the city. Separate but related to this are the housing element, which is the chapter of the general plan, the requirements that deal with housing, the downtown vitalization plan, and a local coastal plan. All of these are actually happening concurrent to the general plan update process. We are also, as part of this process, preparing an update to the zoning code, which are the development regulations for the city that implement the general plan. And the city also has objective design standards happening now as a project that's happening that different staff members from my firm are working on, and that will be related to the zoning code. And then all of this work, the general plan and the zoning code, will be reviewed for potential environmental impacts in the environmental impact report. Next slide. So starting with this broad question of what is a general plan? As I said, the general plan is a long-term policy document to guide future actions in the city. It establishes the city's direction for the next 20 or so years, and it really enables the community to come together to help develop a shared vision for the future. Parallel to this discussion on environmental justice, we have been working on a vision and guiding principles document. And in fact, we just closed a public survey on this where we had over 600 respondents. The general plan is updated every 15 to 20 years. So we are right around that time for the city. And its main goal is to preserve and enhance the strengths of the community and to address topics of concern. And through our work so far, we have absolutely heard that there are concerns in the city of Marina about environmental justice and health issues. Next slide. Our process is approximately a 2-year process, so it's a relatively fast process for a project of this scale. We've started with discovery, and that's looking at existing conditions, and we're presenting some of the results of that on health and environmental justice this evening. And then we are also working on visioning and developing a vision and guiding principles and overall direction as part of this process. From there, we're going to move into alternatives for land use, mobility, and other topics. We'll then develop an overall policy approach that will then lead into crafting the general plan and the environmental impact report, and then into the review and adoption phase. And this project will be reviewed and recommended by the Planning Commission, but ultimately adopted by the City Council. Throughout this entire process is community engagement, and we have developed a pretty robust community engagement program that we've already started implementing. The community engagement program includes workshops such as this. We have a general plan advisory committee that has met multiple times. We have had an online survey that I mentioned had over 600 respondents. We've gone out to the community and done pop-up workshops. We have a large database to inform people about the process. And we're always looking for additional ideas about how to engage the community, particularly the broad cross-section of residents in the city of Marina. So now that you have a very basic sense of what our process is, we'd like to ask you all a couple of questions so we can better understand who you are. And so we're going to launch a series of poll questions to better understand who is participating this evening. There are about 30 people on this call right now, and then hopefully more will be joining throughout. So the first question is, do you live or work in Marina? And these are going to be a series of very short questions, and you will see a poll pop up on your screen, and go ahead and answer that. And then when we end the poll, we'll see the results. So everyone should go ahead and answer this question. We'll give just about 30 seconds for everyone to answer. Okay, and let me just say while we're waiting for this information really helps us with our engagement efforts to be able to understand who is participating in these meetings, because we use that information to then modify our engagement and outreach efforts to try and make sure we're reaching a broad cross-section of the community. Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll and share the results. Okay, so it looks like just under half of the people on the call live in Marina, about 18% work, about 15% both live and work, and 23%, so almost a quarter, neither live nor work in Marina. And then I'm curious, for those who neither live nor work in Marina, if you feel comfortable, if you just want to put in the chat sort of who you are and how you found out about this. I think that would be really helpful for us, and essentially why you're here. You don't have to write a long answer, just help us understand, you know, who you are and how you're here. Okay, let's go to the next question, which is how long have you lived here? For those who have lived here, there'll probably be less people answering this. About 20 more seconds. You all are getting the hang of this. You know, we've been using these polls for quite a while now. Okay, you can go ahead and end the poll. I'm going to move through these quickly. Again, this is not scientific surveys. So it looks like that about 25% have lived here for more than 20 years, about 15% for 5 to 20 years, and then about 25% for less than 5 years. So actually a pretty good diversity here. Okay, let's go to the next question. Are you a renter or owner? Let's launch the poll. Looks like one more 20 seconds. We can go ahead and share. It's actually pretty evenly spread. Go ahead and end the poll, and it's 56% own and 44% rent. So again, that's a pretty good diversity. I'll say from experience that a lot of times at workshops for general plans, it tends to be far more owners than renters. So it's great that there's a lot of renters here this evening. Okay, and then I believe our second to last question is, what is your age? Launch the poll, and I want to apologize for having so many surveys. This is one of the challenges. We were going to put it all in one survey, but it's one of the challenges with multiple languages. It got very long, so we spread it out into multiple here. Okay, let's go ahead and close this poll. So about the highest category is 65 and older, and just under 40%, 22% of 45 to 64. There's quite a good number actually in the 18 to 24 category, which is great, as well as the 25 to 34. So that's great. We like to have a big age diversity. It helps with different perspectives. And then let's go to the last one. And again, this is a question that some people may not feel comfortable answering, and that's perfectly okay. But what best describes your background or your race, ethnicity? Go ahead and launch this poll. And as this is going, one of the questions that we asked during our early phase of this work is, what makes Marina unique and special? And one of the topics that kept coming up is diversity. And so we want to make sure that we are getting actually a wide diversity of people participating in the process, whether that's renters and owners, whether it's ages, time lived in the city, but also race, ethnicity. And so we want to essentially keep track of this. And so it looks like we have the majority of who answered are just over half are white or Caucasian, but we do have a large Asian and Asian American population here as well. We don't have any Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, or Native American, at least those who answered the question here. Okay, so we're gonna move on here, and I'm going to turn it over to Juan, and he's going to give a presentation. I just want to maybe give a quick note here as we're doing this, which is feel free, if you have some questions, to put them in the chat. We will look at those questions, but I want to encourage everyone not to go back and forth in the chat. We want you all to listen to the information, and we will have about an hour after the presentation for question and answer and then small group discussion. So there will be plenty of time, but please go ahead and put any questions or comments in the chat. Okay, Juan.
All right. Well, thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Juan Reynoso. As Matt mentioned, I'll be presenting on today's health equity and environmental justice data analysis that we did this past summer for the city of Marina. So before moving forward and to get us started, we first want to just establish some shared definitions. And so health equity specifically is achieved, or health equity is achieved when every person is able to attain their full health potential and no one is disadvantaged by social position or other socially determined circumstances. So as you can see in the graphic on the right, equity isn't necessarily equality. Equity is about ensuring people have access to the opportunities and have what they need to thrive and succeed. So we use this tools metaphor to help illustrate that. Different situations or different people, different communities require different tools in order to be successful. It's important to address health equity because health inequities have been linked to a variety of health-related illnesses, injuries, and premature death. And these unnecessary health conditions, in turn, cause an economic burden on communities and governments through elevated healthcare costs and decreased productivity. So, for example, income is a major contributing factor to health inequities. Income is important to health because, as I'm sure many of you in the audience are familiar with, income is linked to one's ability to afford healthy foods, to pay for quality housing, to live in an area with high quality education, and to be able to access healthcare and other important and essential services. And so having a low income makes you vulnerable to several health and health issues and pollution burdens, which I'll describe later on in this presentation. The chart on the right demonstrates that on average across the United States, as your household income increases, generally your life expectancy also increases. And again, that's tied to a lot of those issues I just mentioned, rattled off on the left about access to affordable food, healthy foods, access to quality housing, etc. In addition to income, public health research has also found that racism, along with other forms of prejudice, compromise our internal biological systems that are engaged in what's known as the stress response. So when someone experiences discrimination, it activates that fight or flight response that we've learned about since elementary school. And that fight or flight response, or the stress response, just increases your metabolic activity within your body. I don't want to get too detailed into the biology here, but prolonged periods of chronic stress as a result of discrimination degrades our body down to the cellular level. So in our chromosomes, there are these things called telomeres. And you can think of telomeres sort of like those plastic caps or those plastic tips at the end of your shoelaces, whose sole purpose is to protect your shoelace. Now, have you ever had a situation where the plastic tip of your shoelace has kind of eroded away, and then it just makes it really hard to tie your shoelaces? Well, a similar thing happens to our chromosomes in that when they undergo chronic stress from racism or other forms of discrimination, those telomeres shorten to the point that they increase, to the point that they get really small, and then they increase the chances of a mutation happening in your body, which can cause a variety of illnesses and premature death. And so this hypothesis that I just described right now is known as the weathering hypothesis, and essentially has, over the past 20 or 30 years, public health researchers have found how different forms of disadvantage, whether through environmental injustices or health inequities, impact our health outcomes. Another key concept we'll be discussing a lot today is environmental justice, which is often abbreviated as EJ. Environmental justice addresses the inequities that arise from low-income communities and communities of color bearing a disproportionate share of pollution and its associated health risks. And so EJ, or the EJ movement, seeks to correct the legacy of that concentrated pollution and other hazards that are, for the most part, concentrated in low-income communities and often communities of color by reducing those hazards and by involving impacted communities in any EJ-related decision-making. And so although EJ has primarily been seen through the lens of pollution, it fundamentally is about ensuring that all communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color, have a say in the land use decisions that affect them. And so the movement for environmental justice and the movement against environmental injustices has been around for centuries, going all the way back to the European colonization of the Americas, including here in Monterey County in California, through the forced removal of indigenous communities and the reuse of their lands without their consent. More recently, major environmental justice issues have revolved mostly around the siting of waste facilities and other polluting infrastructure in low-income communities and communities of color. In addition, major EJ issues have revolved around urban renewal, redevelopment, and highway construction in low-income communities and communities of color, which has resulted in displacement of those communities from their homes. So in recognition of these historical and ongoing injustices, the state of California formally adopted environmental justice into law in 1999 and then slightly enhanced the definition in 2019. And so environmental justice under state law is defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people of all races, cultures, incomes, and national origins with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And so what that means in a lot of words is that any environmental law in California must take into account environmental justice. And so since environmental justice was codified into law in the late 90s, there's been a variety of new laws over the past 20 to 25 years that have sought to create programs to implement environmental justice across different aspects of policymaking and for today's conversation as part of the land use process. And so that specific law is known as the Planning for Healthy Communities Act, otherwise known as Senate Bill 1000 or SB 1000. And so SB 1000 requires local governments, such as the city of Marina, to identify any disadvantaged communities within its boundaries when they update two or more elements of their general plan. And so since the city of Marina, as Matt described, is working on updating the entire general plan, the city of Marina must comply with Senate Bill 1000. So as part of SB 1000, jurisdictions must minimally address 6 topic areas, which are the 6 boxes you see to your right. Those are reducing the pollution exposure, which is around air pollution, water quality, land use compatibility. Second, around promoting public facilities. So that's around increasing access to parks or libraries, health facilities, community centers, etc. Third, around promoting food access. So around increasing access to grocery stores, farmers markets, community gardens. And I think I saw in the chat that there's someone from the California Food Policy Council here. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. That is one of the required SB 1000 topic areas. The fourth topic area is around promoting safe and sanitary homes. And so that's around for example, around housing quality and homelessness. Fifth, around promoting physical activity, either through improving walkability and bikeability of our streets. And finally, the sixth topic area is promoting civic engagement, and that can be related to increasing language access for residents of city services, providing trainings for residents, or doing ongoing consultation of disadvantaged communities. And so as part of SB 1000, a jurisdiction needs to develop strategies that address each of those six topic areas, and particularly across the city, and especially in the priorities and needs of the disadvantaged communities identified through the data analysis process, which I'll describe in a bit. So you'll notice that in the prior slide, I had disadvantaged communities in quotes, and that's because that is a specific term in state law. And the state defines a disadvantaged community as a low-income area that is disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and other hazards. And so a disadvantaged community is essentially some sort of sensitive population, especially, for example, a low-income area, that's exposed to a high level of pollution and or has a high health burden of some sort. And so the SB 1000 process generally has 3 steps. The first is the data analysis to identify any disadvantaged communities and the associated health and environmental risks, which the full report is available on the Marina General Plan Update website, and I'll be providing an overview of it tonight. And then the second main phase is around engagement, engaging members of the community, particularly those who live in disadvantaged communities, on those 6 topic areas that I just described. And then once all that engagement has been completed, developing policies that address the environmental justice needs and priorities that were identified through the engagement and analysis processes. So I just described a lot of background information. And so now I'm going to be pivoting over to providing that overview of the existing conditions analysis. Because of time limitations, I won't be presenting all of the data from the report this evening, but if you're interested, and I saw that some of you all are students at CSU Monterey Bay, you may be interested in looking more deeply into the analysis and the full report. And again, that is available on the city's website. So here's a list of subtopics that I'll be covering today. So providing some demographics, describing some health outcomes among residents in the city, and then those SB 1000 topic areas that I described earlier. So to dive into that first subtopic around demographics. So the city has just under 22,000 residents within its 9.8 square miles. The map on the right shows the city of Marina, its boundaries. The black dashed line that you see is the city boundaries, and then that pinkish line is known as the city's sphere of influence. Throughout this presentation, I'll be sharing several maps, and so you'll see that, especially that black dotted line come up over and over again, and so that's essentially the city's boundaries. Here are a few charts showing some high-level demographic information of the city's residents according to the American Community Survey, which is part of the US Census Bureau. The chart on the left shows that Marina is relatively young, with over 60% of residents under the age of 45. The chart on the top right shows that Marina is also relatively diverse, as Matt was alluding to earlier, with no one racial or ethnic group making up a majority of residents. About 38% identify as only white, 23% as Hispanic Latino, 18% as Asian, 7% as Black, and 14% as multiracial. So the chart on the bottom right takes that 14% who identify as 2 or more races and then provides a little bit more detail. So the bottom right shows of the 14% that 37% identify or selected white and one other category, 29% selected Hispanic, Latino, and one other category, etc. All right. Right, so throughout this presentation, I'll be showing several maps, and I'll also be showing more nuance and lower level neighborhood scale boundaries. And so these two maps are meant to help orient you to the boundaries of the city of Marina's what are known as census tracts and census block groups. Similar to zip codes, census tracts and block groups are used by the federal government to help organize data down to a local and neighborhood level, and especially the US Census, that's why they're called census tracts, census and block groups, organizes the entire United States into these geographies. And sometimes they have funky shapes, and that's because the geographic size of tracts and block groups mostly depends on a area's population density. And so if an area is smaller, that typically means an area is more dense. If an area is larger, that typically means it's less dense. Note that each census tract is composed of multiple block groups. So for example, if you look at the census tract right in the middle of the map on the left, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but there's one here called tract 142.01. If you then look at the map on the right, that same rectangle, you'll notice there are 3 subdivisions within it. Those are the 3 block groups within that particular census tract. And so some of the data I'll be presenting are in reference to these census tract and block group boundaries. So as part of the SB 1000 analysis for disadvantaged communities, there's a need to analyze whether any areas within the city are low income based on the low income thresholds established by the state and which are updated on an annual basis. For the city of Marina, for this point in the process and given available data, the low income threshold is $72,080. So what that means is that if any census tract or block group has a median household income below $72,080, then that area is considered a low income area. And so the table at the bottom provides the information from that analysis for the 6 census tracts within the city of Marina that are partially or completely within the city of Marina. And as you'll see, we found that one census tract, tract 142.02, was identified as low income, and then 2 additional areas, 2 block groups within separate census tracts were additionally identified as low income. So you can see on the map on the right that these areas are generally clustered in the center of the city. All right, so now we're going to take a quick break and ask a poll question. We're not going to be using the Zoom poll function. We're going to ask you all to type into the chat box, given your lived experience being a resident of Marina, or your experience as a student or as a worker in the city, what do you think are the key health, equity, and or environmental justice issues in Marina?
Just to jump in and join here. So we're, yeah, please go ahead and just, type a few ideas in. This definitely is going to be something that we're going to talk about more in our small groups, but we want to try and get some of your preliminary ideas now. And then for those who did not see in the chat, we have a full detailed existing conditions report, which is on the project website at marina2045.org. Seen any comments from anyone?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, why don't we, I guess people are saving their thoughts for the small group discussion. So why don't we continue on? And oh, we have one good, high paying jobs.
Yes, that's definitely an equity issue. Yes, keep those ideas coming. Water supply, yes, Fort Ord cleanup, hazards and water contaminants. The reason I'm asking you beforehand is I didn't want to influence your ideas and decision feedback. And so thank you all for thinking about it right now ahead of time. Continue to think about it as I start to dive into the overview of the existing conditions report. Thank you all. All right, so first I'm going to briefly go over some high-level health outcomes related to residents in the city. And so this table shows the rates of common health conditions. So for example, asthma and diabetes or heart disease in Marina. So that's that second column in comparison to the average for Monterey County. And then the last column compared to the average for the entire state of California. As you can see, compared to the county and state averages, Marina has a higher rate of children diagnosed with asthma, slightly higher than the county, and then a little bit higher than the state of California, and also a higher rate of adults who needed help for mental health problems, slightly higher in comparison to the county and state averages. On the other hand, Marina has a much lower rate of adults diagnosed with asthma and heart disease in comparison to the county and the state. And so the green cells are those that the city is doing better than the county and the state, and the red cells are those that the city is doing generally worse off in comparison to the county and state. The last two rows, those in yellow, adults diagnosed with asthma and adults diagnosed with heart disease, are slightly higher in the city compared to the county and the state, but they're within what we call the margin of error. And so it's within for those who know stats, it's within the standard deviation for the differences between Marina, the city, and the county and state. So that was the health outcomes. Now we'll be pivoting over to pollution exposure. And so this topic area is most closely tied to environmental justice, and there are significant sources of data from the state, and as you all were listing in the chat, of concern and interest among residents. And so as part of the Environmental Justice Existing Conditions Report, we use data from CalEnviroscreen 4.0, which is a statewide index of pollution burden and socioeconomic conditions that compares all census tracts across the state along the many indicators that you see on the screen right now. And then it ranks census tracts against each other all across the state. And so on the next slide, I'll be showing the results of that analysis specifically for the pollution burden indicators on the left, which are those boxes in blue and light blue. So here are the results for the census tracts in Marina. Green means that a census tract is very low, scored very low for a specific pollution exposure in comparison to the rest of the state. Again, this is all in comparison to all the other census tracts in the state. Light green and yellow means the census tract is generally in the middle, again, compared to the rest of the state. And red means a census tract is scored high for a specific pollution exposure and is considered by the state to be disproportionate burden for that indicator. From this chart, we can see that compared to the rest of the state, Marina is doing well for air pollution and pollution that originates typically from vehicles or some forms of stationary sources. So for example, ozone, PM 2.5, toxic releases from facilities, and diesel particulates. The city is doing quite well for them. That's likely because the city, in comparison to other parts of the state, doesn't have any major interstates or ports or other logistics infrastructure. On the other hand, again, compared to the rest of the state, some census tracts in Marina scored high for proximity to land uses that use pesticides and facilities that process solid and hazardous wastes. And so fortunately, unlike the air pollution indicators, the indicators that Marina scored high for don't necessarily mean that residents are actively being exposed. Those indicators that you see towards the bottom that the city scored high for simply mean that there are census tracts that are in close proximity to potentially polluting land uses. And so the state uses different data sources when they put together this index. And that's the distinction between the air pollution indicators versus those related to hazardous waste sites and solid waste sites. In the next few slides, I'll go deeper into each one of these. And so first off, as I just described, some census tracts in Marina scored high for pesticides use and impaired water bodies. And so that is likely as a result because some parts of the city are close to farms that use pesticides, and then during rain events or maybe when certain fields are watered, some of those pesticides can run off into the Salinas River. And when a scientist goes and tests the Salinas River, there might be elevated levels of certain pesticides. And so that's why the city of Marina scored high for these two indicators. Some census tracts that you all described in the chat are also in close proximity to the former Fort Ord Army base. And so Fort Ord, for those who may not be familiar with, is a former Army base, and it's currently on the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's, the EPA's, what's known as the National Priorities List, which means that this area is prioritized for ongoing cleanup and monitoring. And although parts of Fort Ord, such as the CSU campus, have been cleaned up and redeveloped, other parts of the former Fort Ord boundaries, those orange lines you see on the map, are still in the process of being cleaned up, fully cleaned up and redeveloped into other uses. And so as a result, that's why certain census tracts in the city of Marina scored high for cleanup sites, groundwater threats, and hazardous waste facilities. In addition, certain census tracts also scored high for cleanup sites and hazardous waste facilities, likely because of the presence of the multiple public facilities in and near Marina that process the city's and region's waste. So for example, the wastewater treatment facility, the Monterey Regional Waste Management Facility, and the proposed desalinization plant. Another pollution threat is the small airport in the city's boundaries. And so the airport is primarily used by what are known as piston engine aircraft. And for those of you who are elders in the room, you may remember that back in the 70s, the US started phasing out leaded fuel in cars and fully phased them out in the mid-90s. On the other hand, piston engine aircraft continue to use leaded fuel. And on average across the US, they are the largest source of airborne lead emissions. And so lead exposure can cause a variety of illnesses, including cancer and respiratory issues, especially among young children. Young children exposed to lead have been known to develop neurological disorders. And so parts of the easternmost areas, northeasternmost areas of Marina are within a mile of the airport, which is generally considered the safe distance away from aircraft landing and taking off from an airport. Finally, from an environmental exposure perspective, parts of the city are also within CAL FIRE's fire hazard zones. And so wildfires, as I'm sure many of us have experienced, unfortunately, can cause a variety of health issues, including respiratory illnesses from breathing in of wildfire smoke pollution. And for those who have been more directly in the line of a wildfire, it can also cause burns, traumatic injuries, heat stress, and displacement. And so, as you can see from the map on the right, the northeasternmost portions of the city are within those wildfire hazard zones, and specifically a very small portion of track 14202, which is one of the low-income areas that I mentioned earlier. All right. So now I'll be pivoting away from pollution exposure to those other topic areas of SB 1000. So the ones you see here: public facilities, food access, safe and sanitary housing, and physical activity. We're almost done. This is like the last major section of the presentation. All right, so in addition to the public facilities I mentioned earlier, the treatment waste facilities, we also analyze walk access to schools and residents' ability to reach schools. And so this indicator measures the walk time in minutes to the nearest existing public school. Children who walk to school are generally more mentally alert in the classroom and more physically active. Many areas of Marina, including many of the low-income areas that are, again, outlined in purple, are within a 10-minute walk of a public school, which is considered high walk access. Just one very small portion of a low-income area, the one that's northwesternmost, if you can see my cursor up here, are greater than a 20-minute walk away from a public school, which is considered low walk access. We also looked at walk access to supermarkets and large grocery stores. And so again, this looks at the amount of time it takes for people to get to a grocery store. And so similar to the last map, the darker the color, so here the darker the blue, the closer in proximity and or less number of minutes you need to walk to those supermarkets and grocery stores. And then areas in yellow are considered low walk access. It takes longer than 20 minutes to walk to a grocery store. So access to a supermarket and grocery store is important for promoting healthy communities, for promoting health, because generally areas without access tend to have poorer health outcomes. And as you can see, many areas of Marina, especially those the southern areas and eastern areas, including the easternmost portion of one low-income area, are greater than a 20-minute walk away from a supermarket, which, as I mentioned, is considered low access. Additionally, we looked at walk access to stores that accept CalFresh. And so we use the same scale here, the walk scale of less than 5 minutes to more than 20 minutes. And so we looked at stores that accept the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP benefits, and here in California, more commonly known as CalFresh. And so access to SNAP store locations is important for addressing food insecurity, especially among low-income households. And so as we can see, a lot more areas accept CalFresh than just supermarkets and grocery stores. And there is greater walk access. As a result, there's greater walk access for residents to stores that accept CalFresh. And so many areas of Marina, including nearly all of the low-income areas, have that high access. We also, from a housing perspective, looked at severe housing cost burden. And so severe housing cost burden is when a household spends more than half or more than 50% of their income on housing, whether that's rent or mortgage. And so some areas of Marina are above the statewide average of 18.6%. So across the state, 18.6% of households pay more than 50% of their income on housing, which is incredibly high. And as you can see, that tealish color that covers most of the city, that means that those areas are about 19 and 20% of their residents are severely housing cost burden. So you can think about it as a 1/5 of all residents in those areas are paying more than 50% of their income on housing, which makes it difficult as a result to afford healthy foods, pay for health prescriptions, and other essential services. We also looked from a physical activity perspective at walk access to destinations more broadly. And so destinations can include parks, libraries, schools, faith-based institutions, historical places, and other locations. And so high walk access to a variety of destinations helps to promote physical activity in terms of making it a convenient option of transportation, which in turn, more physical activity improves health outcomes. And so many areas of Marina, including the identified low-income areas, are within a 10-minute walk access of destinations, which is considered high access. And then zooming in specifically to parks and open spaces, we looked at walk access to those. And so similar to others, access to parks and open spaces are important from a health perspective because they promote physical activity and also promote social cohesion. You're more likely to know your neighbors, you're more likely to run into people at parks who live in your neighborhood. And so many areas of Marina are within a 10-minute walk of a park, which is considered high walk access. And for the most part, only the unpopulated areas, so like where the airport is located or the far northwestern corner of the map, are further than a 20-minute walk from a park. And so that was a lot of information. I'm going to try to sum it up in a couple of slides and before we go to Q&A. And so in conclusion, when it comes to health, equity, and environmental justice, Marina has some strengths and some areas for growth. Marina has low rates of adult diabetes and obesity, as well as low exposure to various forms of air pollution, including both stationary source and vehicle-related air pollution. There's also generally good walk access to public parks, SNAP store locations, and a broad array of destinations. However, there are several areas within Marina that have a high potential pollution exposure. Again, potential pollution exposure from agricultural pesticides, the former Fort Ord base, and facilities that process solid and hazardous waste. And some areas of the city also have limited access to schools and supermarkets. Some areas also have high rates of housing cost burden and are in proximity of the airport and fire hazard zones. And so based on the existing conditions analysis, the more detailed one that we conducted and the guidance set forth from the state, parts of Marina are considered environmental justice communities, or otherwise known as disadvantaged communities, DACs. And so the general plan will include citywide goals and policies on health and environmental justice topics, and will need to prioritize the needs and concerns of residents who live in those identified EJ areas. The next steps are to confirm and expand. So we want to hear from you all, whether this resonates with you all in terms of your lived experience living within the city or your own research as students, or organizations doing work in the city. We also want to work with all of you all to develop preliminary ideas to address those issues that we've talked about here and we'll continue to talk about this evening. And over the next several months and into next year, we'll be holding more community engagement, as Matt alluded to earlier, to continue to refine those ideas and ultimately develop environmental justice policies for the updated general plan. And so with that, I believe I will be switching over to Q&A and I'll pass it over to Matt.
Thank you, Juan. Yes, that was a lot of information, and believe it or not, the existing conditions report has about 3 times as much information as what we presented this evening. So we've spent a lot of time looking at data, but as you saw at the beginning, the environmental justice legislation asks that we do 2 things. Is first, we start with the data, but second, and more importantly, is we talk to the community about what you all feel are the environmental justice issues in the community. And so in just a minute, we're going to go into breakout groups. But I would like to just take a few minutes and maybe answer, we're going to see if there's any questions that anyone has about the data, environmental justice elements, or the general plan process. So go ahead and please use the raise hand feature to raise your hand. And sorry, I'm losing my voice tonight. And then is there anyone, if there's anyone who is in the room for Spanish or Korean, so we can keep you in the correct area. Hey, any questions? Don't be shy. We're trying to warm you up for the small groups because that's the time for you all to give us your input. Okay. Let's see. Why don't we go into the breakout rooms? And while we're doing this, I'd like to acknowledge that we have 3 council members on the video this evening: Vishler, Biala, and McCarthy. So welcome. You all will be put in. We're going to have 2 breakout rooms. We're going to split you up so that there's no more than 2 of you in a breakout room. And so we're glad everyone is here this evening. So what we would like to do again is to, we're going to go into breakout rooms. Please use kind of participation principles and common courtesy. Share the floor, let one person speak at a time, be a good listener, ask questions for clarification, respect the ideas and points of view of others. In all of our meetings that we've had in Marina, everyone has done this, and it's just really wonderful to see. So that when we get into the groups, what we want to hear from you are these 3 questions. The first is, are there any additional health equity and environmental justice in Marina? And if so, what are they? You can also add to that if you think that there's anything that we presented that you don't think is an issue. Please let us know that as well. Sometimes the data that we're looking at is really more at a statewide level, and it may not be as applicable at the local level. We try to get local data, but if there's anything you see that may not be applicable, let us know. The second is, what are the issues that you think are the most important that the city should prioritize as part of the general plan process? And then the third is, what is your vision for a healthy, equitable community, environmentally just community? And then what solutions do you have for these issues? We're not going to go through in the groups. We're not going to go through each of these in turn. These are really questions to get our conversation going this evening. But ultimately, what we really want to do for the next hour is to hear from each of you and your thoughts and ideas. So when you get into the breakout room, please be prepared to speak and share your ideas. Okay. Melissa, can you, Juan, do you want to stop sharing? And then Juan is going to facilitate one group. I'm going to facilitate the other. We are going to divide you all up and go into the breakout room. So half of you are actually going to be moved into a breakout room, and the others will actually stay in this room, in the main room here. Okay, Melissa.
Hey, Juan, you're muted.
Thank you, Allison. Really appreciate that. Let me repeat what I just said. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to have a conversation with you all about these important issues in a smaller group setting. Thank you to those who have turned on their cameras, and for those, I encourage you. To make it, since we're going to be in the breakout room for a long time, I think it might be nice if we go around and unmute ourselves and share our names and a little bit about ourselves, whether we're a resident, a student, a business owner. That way it just sparks easier conversation. And so I've already introduced myself, but I can go first. Again, my name is Juan Reynoso. I'm with Raymond Associates, and we are working with the city on the general plan update. First person on my screen is Allison. So Allison, feel free to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Juan. I'm Allison Hunter. I am the Planning Services Manager for the City of Marina, and I'm the project manager for the general plan update from the city side of things. So happy that you're all here joining us.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. Melanie.
Hi, Melanie Wong. I'm here today representing the California Food Policy Council, which is a statewide council of councils, approximately 30 across the state. that have been many of them have done some work on SB 1000, and so we're always trying to keep a handle on that. And I want to find out what your community is interested in. We can provide sample policies related to food equity and food justice if there's a need for that.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining. Tanya is or if I
You got it. Yeah.
yes, okay.
Tanya, yeah. Hi there, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tanya Rose. I am here representing the Blue Zones Project, Monterey County, and also the Monterey County Food System Coalition. So yes, very excited to be here. Really appreciate your presentation. I might have a little black cat come through the frame at some point.
I love cats. I hope they come into the frame.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Hester.
Hi, my name is Hester Parker, and I'm the executive director of Everyone's Harvest, and we run the farmers market in Marina. And that was started as a project at CSUMB, the local university, because of the student Iris Pipard recognizing that there was not good equitable access to food. And so that was really the brainstorm of her, her reason she started this organization. But I also want to mention that I did used to teach a course called Environmental Justice at CSUMB, and I was just so impressed by your presentation. And I actually told the professor who's teaching it now, you should get your students in down this. So I might share your slides with them. Like, you should look at this. It's really great. So thank you so much for that. I'm also on the Monterey County Food System Coalition, and also the local Tri-County Food Policy, what is it? The Nutrition and Fitness Collaborative of the Central Coast, which is part of the California Food Policy Council. So Melanie also encouraged me to attend to make sure that I spoke out about food policy. Sorry, that was long.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much for joining. Kathy.
Thank you. So I'm a city council person, and I'm also a co-founder of an organization called Asian Communities of Marina, ACOM, and we've been in existence for 5 years, and we are a 501c3 organization. And I'm very proud to say this past city council meeting, I was appointed to launch a DEI task force for the city. So hopefully, the synergies of this group and the city as well. So thank you.
That is very exciting because that aligns very well with the promote civic engagement topic area within SB 1000. So definitely want to follow up with you there later on. Let's see, Ralph.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? I am retired. I'm with the Veteran Transition Center of California. I'm on the board of directors. As some of you may know, we're constructing new housing permanent housing for veterans and their families.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I am a resident of Marina, and I'm just on here because I like to be in the know.
I love people who want to be in the know. Thank you for joining. Video's changing. Richard.
Yes, yes. I'm a citizen of Marina for 3 years, the past 3 years, and I'm also one of the planning commissioners for the city of Marina. And I'm very interested in this project, or this portion of the for the general plan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here. And Madison.
Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a CSUMB student. I'm majoring in environmental studies. I'm a senior, and our capstone project is actually to prepare some research papers for the general plan of the city of Marina. So my group is actually working on the environmental justice section. So I'm just here to start gathering information. I've lived in Marina for the past year. I'm from San Diego originally.
Well, welcome. And let's see, I think the only person left is John.
Yes, hi. My wife Linda and I have been residents of Marina for 40 years. Our sons were in diapers when we moved here, and one is now a principal of a neighboring high school. The other is a nurse in the operating room at community hospital. So, and I am also here just to really stay informed.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, John and Linda. I'll try to remember to refer to you all as John and Linda.
Well, Linda's not hanging in. I just.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry, I got confused there for a second. All right. So I think everyone's introduced themselves. Hope you all met someone new. And so as a reminder, that first question that we're hoping to discuss for the next 10 to 15 minutes is based off of what you heard today, and maybe if you had a chance to read the report in advance, and if not, that's fine. Are there any additional health equity and EJ issues in Marina that you think the general plan process should look into? And if so, what?
Juan, I'll speak up. This is not particularly an issue about the list, but my question is, how much teeth does environmental justice legislation really have?
That's a great question, and it kind of a broad and complicated one. It depends on which specific legislation. Are you referring to the one that I talked about, SB 1000? I'm assuming so.
Certainly SB 1000 would be important.
Yeah. So the Office of the Attorney General at the state level does have a Bureau of Environmental Justice. Essentially, what that means is they have a team of lawyers that are paid by, that are state employees, and their role is to monitor the implementation and enforce environmental justice rules, policies, regulations that the state assembly and the governor approve. And so as part of the work that our firm does with yourselves and with many other jurisdictions, we have been in communications with the AG's office, Attorney General's office, and they do enforce, monitor and enforce SB 1000. So essentially what they do is when they notice a jurisdiction is not in the process of complying with SB 1000, maybe willingly or unwillingly, they will send them a formal comment letter, which essentially is sort of like a, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to sue you. And that's happened to about, I want to say like 15 or so jurisdictions throughout the state. I don't think any in Monterey County, if I'm not mistaken, have received one of these letters. And then there's only been one instance where the AG's office after that point, most all jurisdictions after they receive this letter, they get they get concerned, and so they start working to come into compliance. Only one jurisdiction has not, and then the AG's office started the process of a lawsuit, and then they settled out of court before going through the actual court hearings. And so there is some enforcement power, and it's mostly from the Attorney General's office.
One quick follow-up. The existing general plan for Marina would have been created before environmental justice legislation was passed. By including environmental justice in the general plan update, does this now provide a baseline by which one can approach the compliance question or enforce issues related to non-compliance?
Yes. By that report that was published on the city's website earlier this summer, as well as this engagement that we're doing now, we'll continue to do, and then ultimately the general plan update will ensure that the city is in compliance with this environmental justice law. Yes. All right. Hopefully that answered your questions. I saw that Kathy's hand went up, and then Richard.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but we've had severe lessons in the, as John pointed out, how much teeth this environmental justice ordinances and dictates within state agencies has with our desal project. This was a classic case, as you've mentioned in all of your research, Juan, that we actually met all the criteria for classic case of environmental justice, from the polluting facilities to our groundwater threats to our disadvantaged community demographics, the whole thing. I mean, they essentially confirmed everything that you said about Marina. And yet the Coastal Commission twice had a staff report that was very, very strong, supporting this classic case of environmental justice against the CalAm desal project. And suddenly, the last staff meeting, there was a complete reversal. So, this is the reality, and I hear what you're saying, and it sounds very optimistic, but we have lived through, an era where all of the strength of our environmental justice issues were tested, vetted, and then it was ignored. So I'm sorry to bring that in, but this is our history now. And now we are engaged in 3 legal challenges, as well as other public agencies in the region, in order to see if we can correct this travesty on environmental justice. So I'm very sorry, but I just can't let that go. I don't want to give anyone any false impressions that environmental justice is taken seriously in many cases. So, but I just wanted to add in one thing, is that it's not so much the list, but I do think one of the challenges for Marina is how we access marginalized communities and our residents. Like, I'm so glad, that Lisa and Ralph and John are here, because the rest of us are sort of involved in agencies or have elected or appointed positions. And we would like to think we're representing everyone, but, I want to see, and I want more people, residents, average residents, to be part of things, and especially people of color. I think that that's a real challenge for us, and we're not going to get good data unless we do that. And so I know that, people like Allison and, our council are very invested in this, but it is a really difficult challenge. And it's not impossible, but it takes a whole lot of different methodologies and intention.
Great, thank you for adding those comments. And yes, the challenge is a local area at a local level may be in compliance with some state law, but ultimately state regulators can outweigh local decision making. And so I hope these legal challenges are productive.
That's good.
Yeah, I guess since we brought up this conversation, has there been any has the city reached out to the AG's office, EJ Bureau, to get their support in any way? Or
I don't know that we have, we have other legal avenues we're taking. Yeah.
Okay, good to know in terms of other options on the table. And thank you for bringing up the point about better accessing marginalized communities. I think through the poll that we had earlier, it shows that we have to do a better job in reaching out, particularly to Black and Latinx community members, and getting their input as part of this process moving forward. Richard, I see your hand up. I think you're mute. Okay.
Yes, let me find the unmute. Okay. I wanted to emphasize the low-income housing problem for the city. And I know you've explained to us how how many areas it can affect, like health and nutrition, etc. And so I think the city does, has recognized the problem of low and mid-level, medium, what we fondly call it, the lost middle, or what is it, Kathy?
Yes.
Middle,
Missing middle.
Missing middle, yes.
missing middle, yeah. And so a lot of the new housing that's under construction now and in the near term is quite expensive, and I know there are some low and middle income housing that is part of the new construction, but I don't know if it's enough. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that that gets into our general plan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that input, Richard. Tanya.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I mean, one comment that I just wanted to make, I know the EJ chapter is, mandated and just wanting to, and valuing this important conversation, and certainly the historic and continued challenges the city of Marina is facing as it relates to what Councilwoman Biala was mentioning. There's a lot, it feels like a lot of disproportionate burden that the city of Marina carries for the peninsula and the greater region. So I think that that's absolutely critical, and to the extent that that can be highlighted in this chapter is super important. Pivoting from that, I also understand that like all the health and well-being aspects of the general plan are housed in this chapter as well. And I personally go back and forth with that, and just wanting to advocate for ensuring, yes, that they're named here, but they're also named, throughout the entire general plan, in the chapters that relate, around circulation. And, I just think that there's so many opportunities to infuse the different chapters with health, tangible practices and policies that will support community health and well-being. So I get it that it's supposed to belong in this chapter, but I just want to put my voice in and saying that it should be throughout the general plan, if not even its own chapter or element, which I would advocate for, but there's a lot going on. So
yes, and that's a really interesting point you bring up. Every jurisdiction does it slightly differently. Some just have the separate element, some have the separate, have it infused throughout, and then some take a hybrid approach. They do both. They have the separate EJ and or health element, and then have those ideas incorporated throughout. And that decision is part of this ongoing process that we'll be doing until December 2024. So there'll be ongoing opportunities to ensure, like you mentioned, that the transportation element or mobility element incorporates health-related themes of transportation, whether it's walkability, pedestrian safety, bikeability, etc. And so I have written down your note, but yes, continue to ensure that we do that moving forward.
great, thank you. And I have just a few more comments. I'm wondering, I'm thinking about the zoning aspect as it relates to food access, particularly as it relates to urban agricultural efforts in the city. There is a community garden that is growing, literally and figuratively, at Loch Padden Park. But just thinking about other opportunities throughout the city to support that sort of work that could come through in looking at, kind of comprehensive zoning. Also thinking about, it might be more programmatic than something that would belong in the general plan, but just thinking about opportunities to incubate and support food entrepreneurship. Yes. I know there's been some, and I know Melanie's dying to join on this, so I'll let her speak to that. But I think, and I also know, Allison, you were starting to look at some policy related to the, the food truck and mobile vendors and whatnot. But I think there's a lot there, especially really highlighting the incredible cultural diversity and food traditions, that I'm sure are alive and well in the city of Marina, that really could be a beautiful economic, opportunity for lots of folks. I do think there's also a persistent gap across all of Monterey County, but just looking at the CalFresh or SNAP enrollment, so eligibility versus actual enrollment. Again, that might be more programmatic than belongs in the general plan, but I think it's a persistent problem that we're facing as a region. And to the extent that a general plan can kind of address some of that as well. One last thing I didn't hear mention of at all is around tobacco. And I'm very proud of the city of Marina for just passing a tobacco retail license and smoke-free outdoor spaces. I'm thinking about, you know, the targeted tobacco and alcohol advertisements specifically in BIPOC, you know, and lower income communities. And, you know, to the extent that can be addressed in the general plan as well. I think it's a critical piece.
Melanie, do you want to build off of that?
Yes, Tanya, thank you. Those are all terrific comments from food equity perspective. Yeah, I wanted I wanted to bring into this discussion here with this group is that the California Food Policy Council has been is a co-convener of a community of practice for our 6 Central Coast counties that are involved in the SURF process. So I don't know if you're familiar with that CERF, Community Economic Resilience Fund. And so we've been talking about the ways that we can, you know, incubate food businesses and use the food system as a source of jobs. And I think that Marina in particular in Monterey County is attractive because you've got this, you know, you're a very diverse community. We know that in other parts of California that have high proportions of immigrant populations, this drive for entrepreneurship is so strong. You know, people want to do this. And I think that you have some, you know, the real estate is available in Marina for doing this. You have a lot of mom and pop businesses. It's a good environment for that. And so I wanted to put that out there as something that we're discussing across our 6 counties. But I think that the city of Marina in particular would be a good place for this to be happening and to ask for your support in the general plan for food incubators, businesses, mobile businesses, community kitchens, etc. One of the other ways of supporting that on a statewide basis, and I don't know if you want to take this step or not, it's you know, really up to the people in your community, is really putting some limits on fast food chains because they suck up the best real estate typically, and then you never get that Starbucks location back for a mom and pop store. So some communities have decided to do that in order to support their local economies. And that's something that you may want to talk about locally.
Thank you, Melanie, for bringing up these points. Do any of our local residents, let's see, where are they again? John and Richard, have thoughts on some of these food ideas that were just brought in? Oh wait, yes, John, Richard, and also I think Lisa. Ralph, yes, and Madison, if she lives in the, yeah.
Well, I'll go. I go on my way to support local stores, mom and pops. I mean, I think the bedrock of the community. It's like that one I was going. I grew up in Chicago area. It's always like the local delicatessen, local stores, and all that stuff. That was the bedrock right there. That's where you met everybody. You know, it's like going to church at the school. All your friends were there, and they made a neighborhood.
And that money stays in your community. It's not going back to Starbucks headquarters to pay their shareholders.
Any other thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still here. However, I don't feel that I'm knowledgeable enough to really comment in a thoughtful way.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other thoughts related to food access or food insecurity or issues related to the food economy?
I mean, I could say just from the perspective of running the farmers market, if just having more opportunities for these types of access to food in other parts of, we only operate in one part of Marina, and I think there's a lot of food, just in access in other parts of Marina that is not being addressed by small grocery stores or corner stores. So I think just improving the ability for corner stores to provide California grown fruits and vegetables, and again, like sort of falling off, and food incubators and commercial kitchens for. We get a lot of local entrepreneurs who really want to come into our farmers market, and we don't have enough opportunities for them. So it's like if there was more opportunities for them to be able to grow their businesses in the community, that would be, I think, a huge asset. I also kind of wanted to follow up on Kathy's comment about just the ability for the community to be protected from, whether that's can be in the general plan, protected from other communities trying to basically use us as, or use Marina for siting of more polluting industries, just like what is there verbiage that can be put in that and I'm very ignorant in the planning world, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm just saying, is there, besides going to the AG and saying, can you sue these people or whatever, on our behalf? So I think that's all I have to speak about those two issues. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Hester. Kathy, I see your hand back up. Oh,
you're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
The issue that was brought up about Marina's huge diversity and cultural diversity with foods, especially. I would love to be able to do more in terms of expanding people's knowledge of different ways to cook, especially veggies. That's my whole thing. Even with my kids, I'm really disappointed that, my grandkids aren't growing up with, a mindset of not just the fruit, they're good at fruit, but veggies. And, part of it is teaching people how to make veggies taste good. I mean, I'm really, I'm coming down to the nitty gritty here, but there should be so much more education. I'm a nurse by training, and I'm just appalled by how little Americans really understand about their diet. And we talk about it all the time, but my goodness, our diabetes and obesity and, other health issues, continue to rise. So I just feel like there's a part that we're missing here. It is accessibility, but it's also the little things like making it taste good, not just availability, but how do we encourage people to really like and want this kind of diet changes? And then to add in, maybe there's some other cultures that are making really great tasting stuff, but we could use all of that to help foster a better, healthy environment when it comes to food.
Yep. And from experience, we've definitely included those type of nutrition and cooking education type programs in general plans before. So yes, that can definitely be included. Hester. Oh, muted.
I'm doing that now. Sorry. The farmers market is a place where you could do a charrette, like you're talking about access to more people in the community. I mean, I know it's like just one place, but it is a place where a lot of community members, because we have a lot of SNAP users, so you get a broad cross section, a lot of different ethnicities, because we have a lot of culturally relevant food for different cultures. So it is a place where you could maybe get some feedback in a, maybe it's not the most in-depth conversation, but having some kind of charrette style where people can choose issues that they think are important for the community to be included in the general plan. That's an option. And then thinking about other places where you could do that in the community that are community.
Yeah, we can do a pop-up there at some point.
And Kathy, we'll get more cooking demos at our farmers market, because that's
all right. Thank you for that recommendation, Hester. Tanya.
Madison, why don't you go first? Because you haven't said anything yet.
Thank you. Just to go off of what Kathy said, I know in my class as a CSUMB student, I know we're technically in Seaside, but really is right on the boundary. And I live in Marina. I'm 8 minutes away from campus. I think CSUMB is very interested in expanding like the relationship with Marina. I know we have the farmers market, but maybe we have a lot of like cultural clubs on campus where Hispanic serving institution, maybe that we could workshop a partnership and maybe the topic be like, a food, how to, like a culinary thing, and it also be talking about our food justice and food access, and maybe it may be a Thursday where we have our farmers market already happening. So, and then we could just spread the word a little bit and get the groups involved, and just with a little planning on our end, and maybe we could work together.
Great recommendation. Thank you, Madison. Wait, who had their, oh, was it Tanya? Or did your idea already get covered?
No, I'd love to hop in and
Okay.
I love that idea, Madison. I think that's great. And just adding to that Blue Zones project is certainly happy to support cooking demos and cooking workshops in community as well. That's definitely one of the pieces that we add to the work. Just wanted to add something. I know that it's definitely an effort that's in play in broader Monterey County, but the SB 1383, and the edible food recovery work that's happening across the county, I think should be, a part of the general plan. So, just looking at, continuing to support those food recovery networks and distribution networks in accordance with that. I was delightfully surprised. Well, I don't know. It was just interesting information to see the demographic profile of the city of Marina and how it's a much younger population. But I do know there's still, older adults and elderly folks, who might fall through cracks as it relates to adult nutritional needs and healthy and whole meals. So that's another component as well.
Okay. Allison.
Hi, thanks. I did want to mention that I have actually tabled at the farmers market twice. And what I would love some help with from this group or friends of this group is to have a Spanish speaker and probably a Korean or another common Asian speaking person tabling with us, because it's really hard for us. I'm, just another kind of white person at a table. And I have a hard time attracting people to come talk to me without, tackling them as they shop. So we've talked internally a lot about this issue, and when we're out tabling, and I have tabled, Kathy, you can have seen me at like every single event. Some events are easier than others, but farmers market specifically has been a little bit harder to engage with people as they're shopping. And I think a lot of it is a language barrier, and the people at the farmers market are not seeing somebody sitting at our table who looks like them that they feel comfortable talking with. So anytime anybody wants to help me table at farmers market, let me know, and I'd be happy to go out there on a Sunday. We've done a lot of tabling, but it's not easy to get certain demographic people to engage with us in that kind of setting.
Lisa, I see your physical hand. You're on mute.
Okay, I don't have a little hand thing anywhere on here that I can see, so I couldn't raise my hand. But I have a question now. Okay, so my daughter lives in the community. She lives about a mile from me, and they are right like on the low end of the income. And I mean, she gets SNAP. She goes to all the little places where they give out food. They don't go to farmers market because they get so much lettuce from the food thing. And I think storage, how to store all that lettuce and make it last, because it lasts a week, but they've only eaten 1/4 of it. That's a struggle for the people who are, I think, low income. They don't know how to deal with that much food and their house is so tiny. I mean, I could fit like their house in like 1/3 of mine. So it's just like a question, I guess, is what I'm asking. Maybe there's some way to get to them, but they're not coming to the farmer's market because they've already got what they were given, and they just are overwhelmed with what they have.
As a former CSA member, I know that it really is just like getting that education back to, I forget whether it was Kathy or Tanya, that learning what each vegetable is and ways to cook each vegetable and preserve each vegetable and cook them in a way that they could last for a few days in the fridge or more is particular, and which one spoil earlier rather than later is, I think, part of that nutrition education that in partnership with the nonprofit organizations here and or students at CSU Monterey Bay who can provide that support would be important. I do want to follow up on the point that Allison had brought up about interpreters, volunteers. And so for those who represent organizations, are there any, or residents, are there any of you who know of either coworkers, staff members, or even other interested folks who might be interested in supporting with that? And I see Ralph and Madison's hands have gone up.
I'll let Madison go.
Just about the event, just Allison, have you talked to any of the service learning instructors at CSUMB about providing potential volunteer hours?
Nope, that is a good contact. Maybe Madison, you can get in touch with me. I know you have my card and my email.
Yeah, I'll definitely email you.
Great. I will definitely contact them. Thanks for that.
Yeah, of course.
I also saw that Tanya put in the chat that her organization has bilingual Spanish staff and can help support. Great.
Also, I'm just curious, Allison. I've tabled a few times with partnering with the Elkhorn Slough Foundation at Hall Elementary. They were interested in doing community mapping, so I understand that like sometimes it's hard. How are you? Maybe we'll talk about it. I'm curious about how your approach is because I'm just curious. But yeah. Like, do you just ask questions, or do you have like an activity that they engage with, or?
The times that I've done at farmers markets specifically, we've just had informational handouts in also, English, Korean, and Spanish. At other tabling events, we have had some kind of more activities and more children's things if there are kids there to kind of keep them entertained while we talk with parents. But we're definitely open to learning some new tricks of the trade. So yeah, get in touch with me if you would. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad we were able to make that connection. Let's see, Ralph.
I have several things I want to say.
Yes, please.
First of all, with the food, I don't know, has anybody ever gone to, I think, the second Saturday of the month at the library? All that, it's organic produce, it's free. And it's a whole variety of stuff there. It's fantastic. It's not just lettuce. And believe me, I know what you're talking about with lettuce. Do you know Monet, the artist, used to like lettuce soup? You ever had lettuce soup? I have. It's actually quite delicious. It's really good. So I want to put that out. Also, Service Learning Institute at CSUMB. I'm also with the Boy Scouts, and for the first time ever, we got a student to help us as an assistant scoutmaster through the Service Learning Institute over there. It's never been done before in this district, in our district. It's a fantastic source of assistance, and I would suggest maybe for people with foreign language skills, it might be fantastic. But you got to try it. You just got to try it. The other thing is, I think we got to be a lot more creative. I represent VTC also. We are taking over the old VA clinic, and we have some ideas there. We're working with Meals on Wheels to set up a kitchen there. Also to teach students there about the hospitality, how to cook food and all that stuff, what's good nutrition. We are also working with CSU maybe to get classrooms in. That's being worked out right now. And most of all, we're going to have housing over there too. So when is that going to happen? I have no idea. We thought we had the funding for it. It fell through about a year ago. And that's another issue I have with anything like that is the funding. It takes forever, a year and a day, forever to get, especially housing built. You have a great idea, but you think you got the funding, then all of a sudden the economy tanks and you don't have it. And then you get the funding, and then maybe you don't have a developer. It's so many things. But I think the one over at that we're working on right now, that took about 8 or 9 years to get that moving. That's ridiculous for long-term housing. It's absolutely ridiculous, especially now. But this is a problem that was developing from what, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago with the housing. You don't grow, you don't spend your way out of it in a matter of a couple of years. So that's the important situation we're in.
So there's a need to speed up the development process of low-income housing.
Yes, and the funding especially too. It's not simple.
That's harder. All right, well, great. Thank you, Ralph, for these ideas. Just jotted them all down. Let's see, Kathy.
Thank you again. So this is what I'm talking about. We all the talk about lettuce. It's a high water utilization crop, and it's mostly water and not nutrition. So again, we're promoting this, but like it would be better if we promoted, broccoli, for example. That's chock full of, daily requirements for vitamins, but just, again, the education part. But I also wanted to say that poor Allison, you're the topic that you've been, at the farmers market for is general plan update, right? So, this is her challenge, is how do you get marginalized communities to be interested in a general plan update? I mean, if we were out there promoting food and we're cooking some great, tomatoes, or we're, broccoli or whatever, we could be giving out free samples and, and getting, but Allison is out there trying to get people to, to participate in a survey on the general plan. You have to start off with what a general plan is and how many seconds do you have to catch them, right? So this is the huge challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we have a couple more minutes left before we go back to the main room. And I see Richard, your hand is up.
Yes, Allison, my wife is very fond of the farmers market in Marina, and she goes there on Sunday mornings by 8:30 or early. But one of the things that I've noticed, she goes maybe 3 out of 4 weekends a month, so she's often there. And she goes for the produce and often for the fruits and produce and vegetables. But one of the things that I've noticed that a large percentage of the participants in the market, the customers, are probably Asian Filipinos. Very many Filipinos, maybe on the range of 50% of the shoppers, and another 20 or 30% might be Spanish speaking, and then you'll have a smattering of Korean or other Asian, and very few from the Indian subcontinent.
So Richard, are you volunteering your wife to sit with me at one of these and help me talk to people?
Yeah, but she's bilingual in Chinese and English.
Great. Bring it on.
So yeah, but there's not very many Chinese. She will talk to all the Chinese she sees, and many weekends we go and not a single person from China is that she knows that she see. So anyway, yeah, she can come and sit, but she will get, if she gets bored, then she'll give it up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Richard. And what I also heard as part of that comment is that there's a need for better outreach to Marina's diverse community so that all residents have an opportunity to, or are excited about going to the farmer's market. Okay, Tanya, I'm going to give you the last comment before we're thrown back to the main room.
Okay, just really quick. I was surprised in the report out that the rates of diabetes and prediabetes were lower in the city of Marina. That doesn't track with what we know about diabetes and prediabetes in Monterey County as a whole. So just curious around that one. I'll put a link in the chat relating to a community health needs assessment that was just done last year. Maybe y'all have looked at it, and maybe Marina is an outlier, but generally prediabetes and diabetes across Monterey County is quite shockingly high. So just wanted to flag that one for you.
Great, yes, please do send that data over. We use data from the California Health Interview Survey, their 2020 data set, which granted may not be the best year because the pandemic, and so there might be data anomalies as a result, but it is the most recently available data set they have. So, but yes, please do send that report over. That would be helpful. And I am getting an announcement that we can leave the breakout room. So you can click the blue button. Thank you all for participating. Really excited by all the content.
Thank you.
All right. We are back.
All right. Welcome back. Well, I hope you all had a good conversation. We are just about done with the meeting, so just a couple of closing comments about where we are. So in the process, so we are, as I had mentioned previously, we are working on the visioning at this point and moving into the alternatives, and we'll be looking at different, not only land use and physical alternatives in the city, but we're going to be looking at different policy alternatives. And one of those topics we're going to be looking at in further detail is health and environmental justice. And we have a few upcoming meetings just to share with everyone. So the first is we have our 4th GPAC meeting, or General Plan Advisory Committee meeting on October 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. That is going to be in person at the library. We are going to be talking about a very preliminary draft vision statement, and then looking at different areas of the city for potential land use changes. The group General Plan Advisory Committee is relatively small. I believe there's 11 members. Members of the public are welcome to attend as well. We have our 5th General Plan Advisory Committee meeting on November 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to be looking in more detail at the vision statement and at land use alternatives, beginning to think and craft land use alternatives. And then we are going to have a joint City Council and Planning Commission study session on November 14th. We had a joint study session in January of this year, earlier this year, to kick off the process. And at this meeting, we're going to look at the key drivers of the plan and the draft vision and guiding principles. So those will be important topics that will be addressed so that we can continue to move forward with the process. If you would like additional information, you can go to marina2045.org. The existing conditions reports, including the environmental justice existing conditions report, is there on the website. You can also sign up for updates on the process, so we will send out emails. And then you can also, if you have questions, you can also contact Allison Hunter. Her email is here, or you can also contact Guido Erstoni, who is the director. His email is not here, but he is easier to find. He's easy to find. So great, I see a few hands raised. So Councilmember Biala, go ahead.
I was under the impression that our joint session was October 12th. Is that changed now?
October 12th is the objective design standards.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Too many joint sessions.
I know. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome.
And Matt, if I might, this presentation will be uploaded to the general plan update website, right?
That is
Perfect.
we will have it up there. And as well as we will have it in Korean and Spanish. So you'll be able to see it in Korean and Spanish as well. So even, I don't know if we necessarily had anyone who needed the interpretation. It will be there and it will be available for anyone who wants to look at it later. And we hope that people will. Okay. Any final thoughts from anyone before we leave for the evening? Okay, and as Councilmember Biella.
I just want to say that I got a lot from this meeting, and I wasn't. My expectations were not to come away with having been rejuvenated, but our group was very good, and I really appreciated this.
That's great. We aim to surprise and please. So we're glad. You know, again, the topic. There's so much to dig into, and you know, with all of these topics. So. And it's so critically important because this truly affects the health of everyone in the city. So it is so important that we talk about this and that we have these community conversations. One thing that I didn't mention actually, and I apologize, is that from this information, we got a lot of feedback tonight. There's probably some additional data and information that we're going to want to do a little supplement to that existing conditions report with a little bit more data and ideas that people came up with this evening. We're then going to start crafting policy ideas, and we're going to have some focus groups on these environmental justice topics to explore and dive a little deeper into what are those solutions to the issues that we have identified. We'll present some ideas and get some feedback. And then that's going to be that next step. But as always, if you have any thoughts, you have any ideas, you want to chat further about this, please reach out to Allison. Allison can get you in touch with our team, and we're happy to talk more about this. Okay. And so with that, thank you all for sharing the evening with us. We really appreciate your time with this important topic, and we will, I hope, see you all very soon. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.